Welcome to the Coming Home Well podcast, the show that educates, supports, and advocates for the veteran community. Your host, Dr. Tyler Piron, U.S. Army retired, will bring you exciting conversations with amazing guests about resources, research, and military history, all geared to helping our warriors to come home well. Here's your host, Dr. Tyler Piron.
Welcome back to Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Tyler Piron, and today we are again talking with Paul Dillon of Dillon Consulting Services. He's also an adjunct professor at the Sanford School of Public Policy at Duke University, and we are going to talk about veterans and entrepreneurship. Veterans make great entrepreneurs, and so I'm not going to steal Paul's thunder and sort of go into all the reasons that entrepreneur and veterans go hand in hand. But it is definitely a different path than we often think about when we're getting out of service. Paul, thanks again so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Thanks so much for having me back, Tyler. I greatly appreciate it.
Now, I know you've done a lot of consulting. How much consulting is there for entrepreneurs?
It's a very interesting field. And there are some reasons why people who have gone through military service have great skills to be entrepreneurs. And actually, they're the same type of reasons why veterans make great employees. But there's a few twists to that you can say why they make great entrepreneurs. As we discussed the last time, veterans, people who have served in the armed forces of the United States, have the commitment to overwhelmingly accomplishing the mission. They know how to work hard because the days are long, very long most of the time. They have the ability to work as a member of a team, but more important, form a team and lead it. And people just don't have that experience many times coming out of school or from a corporate environment. So it's the whole armed forces deals with the buddy system. So you work as a member of a team, and in most instances, you have the ability to lead a team. There is one characteristic, though, that I think makes veterans great entrepreneurs if they choose to take that path. And that's the ability to pivot on a moment's notice from plans that aren't working to plans that do. Because your first idea for a startup or a company might not be the right one, might not be a great fit. So you have to have the ability to pivot and maybe do this much more than once, to pivot to an idea that actually will work.
Yeah, let's call that continuation basis or a bias where, I'm going and I'm going to try to put this plane down, even though things are going, they should do a turnaround or go around. But in the military, you got to be flexible. The enemy gets a vote is how it's often explained, right?
Right. The enemy gets a vote. And so this ability to be flexible, which people don't think, as I mentioned last time, the general public thinks the military is all about following orders. Yeah, that's a great part of it. But it's also the ability to be flexible, because if your battle plan isn't working, you better figure out something that does, because people are going to get killed. This isn't a matter of profit and corporate profits. It's a matter of life and death. So the ability to pivot, I think, is very, very important. The ability to take care of your people, your customers, your clients, and if you hire people, the ability to take care of them, putting those two constituencies first. Servicing your clients, taking care of your people, profits will come.
That's a really interesting point, because that's one of the things that makes the military, the U.S. military, so great, and why we are asked to help train around the world is our NCO Corps and the ability of everyone, not just the officers, to be able to issue adjustments based on the commander's intent, as opposed to very strict directives, like we're seeing with the Russians. If the officer isn't saying it, they don't do it, and vice versa. Where the U.S. military, it's take that hill, and how you get to that may change on a moment-to-moment basis.
Right. And it was interesting. It's a tremendous book out, Dan Senior and Saul Singer, in their book Startup Nation. They refer to Israel one of the most successful entrepreneurial nations on earth on a per capita basis. And they attribute their success in entrepreneurship to a lot to their compulsory military service, which creates this environment for hard work and this common commitment to accomplishing the mission. You know, the young people have that because they're required to serve. And these two gentlemen attribute the entrepreneurial spirit of that nation largely to their compulsory military service.
I wonder if there's a part of that where they're dealing with people of other cultures, other groups, people that they wouldn't normally associate with. You go to school, high school or college, and that's sort of your world. And then you have this compulsory military service where you're exposed to lots of different people, different ideas, and different contacts.
Yep.
And so those fortuitous happenstance of, hey, I have an idea, and this guy says I can help you, or vice versa, or whatever.
Right. I certainly saw that in the age of the draft. When I served in Vietnam with it was everybody from a Harvard professor who was a squadron leader for a company of helicopters. We called them the schoolboys. We painted mortar boards on the face of their Hueys. Everybody from a Harvard professor to some kid from some rural state county who never completed high school. So it's everybody in between.
Right.
And we have that ability. How are you going to forge them into a fighting force? I mean, it's a very unique skill, which the military says. And the Kauffman Foundation, which is an entrepreneurial support organization, very well recognized, states, and I'm going to quote from their writings about veterans, quote, "A commitment to excellence, attention to detail, strategic planning skills, and focus on success are the same traits that make business owners successful." And I think the Kauffman Foundation puts it better than I ever could. There's one other point that I want to make. We just had at Duke University a full day seminar on the impact of artificial intelligence. Whoa. Tyler.
Lots of opportunity out there.
Oh, man. Did that open my eyes? I mean, these were experts from the faculty and outside the faculty who came in and spoke at this. It was full day. And you saw what was happening. They're telling you what's happening out there. In the world of work and nonprofit, whatever. Things are going to change. You're going to have to be, even if you work in a company, in a manufacturing firm, in a law firm, in a retail business, you're going to have to be entrepreneurial. You're going to have to think entrepreneurially. So this isn't just for people who want to start their businesses. This mindset is critical no matter what field you go into, for-profit, nonprofit, whatever.
That agility, that adjust fire as needed, serve your customer.
Right. Looking for opportunities that might not be there on the surface and going for them and recognize them because business is going to be conducted in the same way in the future that it is now. And I'm all for that spirit. The kids in the neighborhood who run the proverbial lemonade stand, I'm all for it. There's a kid in the neighborhood who'll come over, in the summer, wash your car in the driveway. I'm all for it to start very young, thinking entrepreneurially, because you're going to need that.
And AI is a great example. I mean, the entire point of AI is to find patterns that are not obvious with large data sets, but the takeouts of those, the applications of them, we're somewhat familiar with. The initial parts, people have heard of ChatGPT, which is kind of new, but same things with Siri or some of the other voice services. It's all going to be there, and there's so much opportunity to start a new business and provide some service that nobody thought of yet. You're going to find that need and fill it. But there's a lot of things. The landscape is changing. So what is the landscape regarding veteran entrepreneurship today?
Before I touch on that, I just wanted to comment on one of my friends who said he couldn't see all the hoopla about artificial intelligence. He said he's dealt with people who have had artificial intelligence throughout his career.
Yeah.
But the landscape for veterans today is pretty good. I mean, veterans read in the media all the time, coffee shops, tech support companies, landscaping services, security firms, a whole host of businesses to mention that veterans are starting. And according to the SBA about veteran business owners, they say that there's nearly 2 million veteran-owned businesses in the U.S., representing a little over 9% of all businesses nationwide. And they employ right now over 5 million people with an annual payroll of over $195 billion. And contributing about $1 trillion to the national economy. So there's more veteran-owned businesses out there than you might think. And
I wouldn't have thought that. I mean, I know there's a lot of veterans, but I would not have thought it was quite that large.
And according to the SBA, 45% of these younger people coming home from Afghanistan and the Iraq wars do want to start their own businesses, but there's not enough who actually do. And we really don't know why. You know, after World War II, which is, despite how old you think I was just born after that, half the people coming home from that war started businesses, believe it or not, because of the unprecedented opportunity. The economy had just, talk about a pivoted from wartime to a completely new economy. But the rate of veterans starting their own businesses has dropped considerably. In 2021, it was 11%. And even more important, just over 7% of all current veteran-owned businesses are started by veterans under 35 years of age. The rest are started by older vets. Now, that makes some sense, because if you serve 20 years and you retire, you're coming out with a pension, with health care, a whole host of benefits.
It kind of cushions the shock of trying to get health care and all these other things that you would normally, it'd be difficult to get. And healthcare is so expensive, especially if you're not part of a group plan.
That's right. And for older vets who retired at 65, they usually have 401ks, 403bs, not pensions. They've got Medicare. Their house is probably paid off. Their kids are out of school by that age. So they can afford to take the risk of starting a business. So it makes some sense that it skews to the older people who have started businesses, but there are opportunities for younger people. It is a risk. And I've got to say that because I tend to be an optimist by nature. I believe in Colin Powell's dictum that optimism is a force multiplier. I also believe in his first statement that it's not as bad as it looks, it's going to look better in the morning. And it does. But according to the Department of Labor Statistics, Bureau of Labor Statistics, 20% of all new businesses fail during the first 2 years, 45% during the first 5 years, 65% during the first 10 years. It's a risk.
And it probably depends a lot on the type of business. Restaurants are notorious for folding and restarting or coming up with a new idea or part of that pivot. It's a lot harder to do when it's a fixed type of thing, like a restaurant of especially a particular type.
Right.
Or some have less risk, some have more risk. And I'm sure that there's ways and resources to sort of figure out what that risk tolerance looks like for that particular type of business.
There is, and people have gone before you can tell you that, and venture capitalists and financiers can tell you that. But I mention it because we hear about Zuckerberg. Everybody wants to be like Zuck, and we hear about all the other Elon Musk, we hear about all the other entrepreneurs. We hear about rocket companies and everything, that we don't hear enough, I think, about the risk. And I did want to mention that there is a risk. So if you're going to do this, it sure is nice to have a second income somewhere. And it sure is nice to have some benefits like healthcare somewhere.
Yeah.
And that then mitigates, I think, a downside for you, that to go ahead and try and start something. But again, the mindset is terribly important, because you're going to have that mindset no matter what business you go into. You are not going to practice law the way it's practiced now for the next 50 years. I guarantee it. It's going to be different. It's
no matter what field it is.
No matter what field it is. And it's changing very rapidly. Where when I was coming up in business, it was changing, but not nearly as rapidly. People stayed in the accounting departments for 30 or 40 years.
They got one job and stuck with it. Right.
You're not going to be able to do that in the future.
And I've seen statistics where people move on average every 18 months to 3 years now. Now, government's a little bit different, some of the larger corporations, but even there, like with all these layoffs in the tech industry recently, you're going to have to be a lot more agile. And if you're your own boss as an entrepreneur, you have a lot more flexibility to make some of those changes and roll with the punches than you do if you're working for somebody else.
You do, and I think it's really an important point. I mean, if you own it and you're running it, then you're answering to your customers, clients, and your employees, but you're not answering to anybody else. Or unless somebody's financing you, then you're answering to them too. But those are the people you're answering to. It's not to some executive vice president of some corporation. So
right, the buck stops with you, but gives you the most opportunity, but at the same time the most risk. And so you have to balance these things. But there's a ton of resources, and we'll get into that. Don't be put off if you have a great idea or you want to start a business. There's a lot of resources and a lot of help out there that make it work, at least get you in the right track, mentoring, funding. There's all sorts of stuff out there. So there are a lot of resources out there. What are some of the ones that veterans can use to help start their own business?
There's a good number of them, and I understand you're going to put these on your website, so I'll just briefly go over them. There's veteran-led incubators. The most prominent one, I think, is Bunker Labs, which started in Chicago.
What is a incubator? In case folks aren't familiar with the concept.
An incubator helps an entrepreneur take an idea, and through mentorship and perhaps helping them find financing, helps them take their idea into fruition. And so they're incubating this business idea into, if it works, into an actual business that they can run. And they do it through mentorship, training, and helping to secure financing if they have the right opportunity. So they're taking and incubating this idea. And Bunker Labs is probably the most prominent one. Started in Chicago by a young ex-naval lieutenant by the name of Todd Connor, a wonderful person. He's now has chapters in 35 states. We have one down here in the Raleigh-Durham area called Bunker RDU. And it's a wonderful organization to go to if you have an idea and to see if you can turn that into an actual business. And the Bunker Labs has something called Launch Lab Online, enables veterans who are not near one of the locations where Bunker Labs is located to get some of the basic tools necessary to start a new business. There are veteran-led accelerators. Now, an accelerator is the business is already formed, but you want to take it to a different level. You want to accelerate it. You want it to a different level. Vet Tech out in California in Silicon Valley is probably the most well known. They've got an extensive network of financial government management resources to bring veteran-owned businesses into the next level of success. There's university programs. The most famous one is Syracuse University's Entrepreneurial Bootcamp for veterans with disabilities, one of the most extensive programs in higher education for veteran entrepreneurship. They've expanded that to 7 other colleges and universities around the nation. Go look at your community college, because many times through their small business development centers, they have resources to help you start your own business. And many states have a robust community college system. We have an extensive one here in North Carolina. And through their small business development centers, they can give you hopefully the resources to help you with your idea.
That isn't one that I would have thought of.
Yeah, the community colleges are great resources. There's government services, the SBA's Boots to Business program as an example of a type of government service for transitioning service members to give them some basics in starting a new business. There's online resources. The Warrior Rising Vet to CEO program is a free online training program that assists veterans in leveraging their skills to start or buy a business and run it successfully. That was started down here by a guy in North Carolina, in Wilmington, North Carolina, a wonderful man. And I met him years ago when I moved down here. And it's a wonderful online program to help you think through your idea and bring it to fruition and hopefully get you some financing if it's a good idea and it's worth financing.
Well, that's an interesting point about, because you could have the best idea in the world, but running a business is often different than having the good idea. So it's kind of got to have both.
Right.
The how to run the business, the administrative side, and pay your taxes and all the things you got to do that we don't think about that businesses have to do.
Right.
And then do the business part. And so it's kind of both. That's why these incubators and accelerators and the other ways to sort of get that skill set is because in the military, we don't learn how to run a business. Right. Businesses are a whole different thing.
Right. What do you do with, you've got to have an accounting system, right? You've got to create a website. You've got to have now security, right? Is a big, so there are all these issues that come with all these administrative issues that come with running a business that I can tell you from being in business for over 47 years are absolutely necessary. If you don't have a good accounting system, how are you going to keep track of your money and pay your taxes? If you don't have website security, emails, I mean, in this day and age, you're playing with fire. So there's all these administrative duties that come with just running the business that you need to learn if you don't have those skills, and most people don't. There are community organizations. The Service Corps for Retired Executives has a Veteran Fast Launch Initiative, but there's one other initiative that really intrigues me, Tyler, and that is veteran boot camps. Coding boot camps. And there is one in Chicago that I'm very familiar with because I talked to the guy when he founded it. He was the next door neighbor of a good friend of mine. He's not a veteran. He was a commodities trader and did very well and wanted to do something for veterans. And he came upon this idea. He'd been somewhat familiar with coding boot camps, which are short 6 to 24 weeks, very intense training programs to teach people how to become software developers, coders. And he didn't know about veterans, so I sat down. We had lunch with him. We talked about the veteran entrepreneurial scene. This is he's been in business about 7 years. So this is probably maybe 8, 9 years ago. I didn't know anything about coding boot camps, but my youngest son is a computer engineer, electrical engineer from Marquette University. He filled me in on coding camps. So I talked with Rod Levy, and he has been very, very successful in running this organization called Code Platoon. And there are others around the nation, but he has an online program. He's certified he has gotten foundation support. And it's very intriguing to see his graduates are snapped up just like that in $80,000 to $100,000 a year jobs. And it's for veterans or spouses of veterans. And he's been very successful. I think a world of him. He came up. Now, he's an entrepreneur. He came up with this idea and is running it very successfully. So
that is certainly a way to jump into either working as a coder or working for yourself as a 1099 employee or starting your own business. It's a good start.
Right.
Yeah, that's excellent. So we're going to have all these links and all these organizations that Paul has mentioned up on the Coming Home Well Facebook page, and we'll put a link to it on Instagram and all those things. So that way you don't have to write them down or try to figure out which one he's talking about. We'll have the descriptions and the links available online. So if you're interested in any of these organizations, just go look for the Coming Home Well link. It'll be in the show notes as well. It'll make it super easy. Paul, entrepreneurship is something so cool because you get to develop your own company, develop that service, that need that needs to be filled. And we've talked in other shows and other things about tradespersons, people that HVAC or plumbers or electricians. Those are some of the most common businesses out there because the barrier to entry is pretty low. If you're an electrician, you've already got your license, you've how to be an electrician. Working for yourself is pretty easy to get started. And there's always going to be a dearth of service people. It's one of the biggest challenges right now with solar and wind. There's all these projects that they can't tie into the grid because we don't have enough electricians out there that can connect it in. So there's lots of opportunities out there.
There are, and the Teamsters run a program called Helmets to Hard Hats. Go look at that, and they will give you some training in these skills. So, I mean, you go work for a company for a while and learn the trade by doing it. And go out and form your own business. And there are quite a number of veterans who have gone out and done that. I mean, it isn't just high tech. And some of the most successful veterans, some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I know are not in technology. And now these people aren't veterans, but veterans could do this. And we have time. I could just give you a couple examples. I helped a guy that I knew in Chicago to start a real estate consulting firm. And I gave him his first piece of business. That's where my Chicago office is. As long as I bring in bagels and cookies, I'm welcome in his office. But Steve is just a wonderful entrepreneur. Nobody taught him this. He learned it himself. He learned how to keep the books. He learned how to run the business. He treats his people very well. He pays them very well. It's now his principals who have taken over the business. He's retired. But this is a real estate consulting business. It's not a high-end technology business. And very successful. I mean, just wonderful person. And it's done it the right way. Another person I know in Chicago runs a cheesecake business. Mark Schulman.
A cheesecake business.
Right. And his company is called Eli's Cheesecake. It is nationally famous. His father owned a restaurant. Their signature dessert was this cheesecake. When his dad died, he didn't want to run the restaurant. But he kept this cheesecake company going. White House, state dinners. I mean, he is a nationally known entrepreneur through his product. And he is a wonderful gentleman. Just the salt of the
his
earth.
passion for this cheesecake from the restaurant of his dad and said, I don't want to run the restaurant, but this cheesecake is so good.
Right.
We need to focus on that.
Right. And he's been wildly successful. It isn't just always about technology. I mean,
Fantastic.
those are two examples. And these people aren't veterans, but these two gentlemen are two of the finest gentlemen I have ever known in my life, and they're just very successful.
So, I mean, you can take anything that you have a passion for or a lot of skill in and start your own business. And there's a ton of resources out there. Paul, before I let you go, is there anything I should have asked you about but didn't?
Other than, I started my journey through veterans, as we discussed last time, which was an entrepreneurial experience.
Mm-hmm.
Crane Chicago Business came to me. One thing leads to another. So my experience was just happenstance, but seeing opportunities that are good and having the ability, the intestinal fortitude to actualize them.
Yeah, jump on it and right. Own it and take
right.
it and make it yours.
Right. Those are the two things that I think I'd want to mention.
That's awesome. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Thank you, Tyler. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us this week on Coming Home Well with Dr. Tyler Piron. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Follow us on Instagram at ComingHomeWell_BTS or on Twitter at ComingHomeWell. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well, this is Coming Home Well.